We were the kind of couple others seemed to admire. On the surface, our lives radiated harmony and a quiet success that felt both earned and unpretentious. I was a man of 33, married to her for 6 years after 3 years of dating. She was 30, graceful in ways that drew people to her effortlessly. Together, we had built a life that seemed solid, if not idyllic, with 3 young children who filled our days with a chaotic but welcome energy. Our home was a modest but comfortable house in a suburban neighborhood. It was neither luxurious nor wanting, the kind of place where each room held marks of a growing family. The walls bore handprints smudged in playful messes, while the shelves carried a mix of children's books and the occasional adult novel she swore she'd finish one day. I worked a stable job in logistics, a field that offered predictability but little excitement. She had left her career to stay home with the kids, a decision we'd made together and one that seemed to suit her nurturing instincts. Our routines were well-worn but comforting. Mornings began with the chaos of breakfast preparations and school runs, where she'd manage the kids with a practiced ease that always impressed me. Evenings were quieter, a rhythm of shared chores, bedtime stories, and fleeting moments of peace once the children were asleep. Weekends were reserved for family outings to the park or simple movie nights at home. It wasn't extravagant, but it was ours. Financially, we were stable, though far from wealthy. My job paid well enough to cover the mortgage, the endless stream of child-related expenses, and the occasional indulgence, like a family vacation or a dinner out. She managed the household budget with the same care she gave everything else, ensuring there was always enough while finding small ways to make life feel abundant. I'd always considered us partners in every sense of the word. Our relationship, though tested by the demands of parenting, felt strong. She was attentive, warm, and present, qualities I'd come to rely on in ways I rarely articulated. In her, I saw not just my wife but the mother of my children and the keeper of our shared dreams. There was trust, or so I thought. Trust born of years spent navigating the ups and downs of life together. It felt unshakable, the kind of bond that could weather anything. Yet, as I now reflect on those days, I realize how easily one can mistake familiarity for certainty, and how often we overlook the subtle fractures forming beneath the surface. I didn't know it then, but the foundation of our life was already beginning to shift. At the time, I would have described us as happy. Content, even. But contentment, I've since learned, can be a precarious thing, too easily disturbed by forces unseen and unspoken. It's not always the storms that bring down a house, sometimes, it's the quiet erosion that goes unnoticed until it's too late. It began as a faint ripple in the calm waters of our life, a feeling I couldn't quite name but one that refused to be ignored. At first it was nothing more than an impression, the way she'd look past me during dinner or how her responses to my questions sometimes felt absent-minded, as if her thoughts were elsewhere. I told myself it was stress, the ceaseless demands of parenting 3 young children. But the feeling lingered, gnawing at the edges of my certainty. I started noticing the small changes. She'd taken to spending more time on her phone, a behavior that, while not unusual in itself, felt oddly out of place for her. She'd laugh softly at something on the screen but never share what it was, quickly locking the device when I entered the room. Her evenings, once dedicated to our shared rituals of unwinding after the children were asleep, were now often spent apart, her attention consumed by something unseen. There were other things, too. Her wardrobe began to shift subtly. She'd always dressed with a casual elegance, but now there were new pieces, blouses that seemed too fine for the everyday chaos of our lives, jeans that hugged her in ways I hadn't seen before. She said she'd found them on sale or that they were gifts from her sister, and I accepted these explanations without question. After all, why wouldn't I? She'd never given me a reason to doubt her. Yet doubt had a way of creeping in, planting seeds that sprouted in the quiet moments when my mind wandered. I began to scrutinize her movements, noting the times she'd leave the house without a clear purpose. A grocery run that took longer than usual. A sudden need to go for a walk alone, something she'd rarely done before. When I asked, she'd smile and assure me it was nothing, her tone light but her eyes evasive. I told myself I was imagining things. I wanted to believe that my suspicions were a reflection of my own insecurities, not of any change in her. But the coincidences piled up, each one harder to dismiss than the last. One evening, as she showered, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. The screen lit up briefly, enough for me to catch the preview of a message from a name I didn't recognize. My chest tightened as I read the words, "Can't wait to see you again." I'd like to say I confronted her then and there, demanded answers and clarity. But instead, I froze. My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, a misinterpretation of something innocent. Or maybe it wasn't. I put the phone down before she could catch me looking, my hands trembling as I stepped away. From that moment, my perception of her, of us, shifted. I started watching more closely, piecing together the fragments of her behavior into a picture I hoped I was wrong about. The way she'd sometimes blush when checking her phone. The faint traces of perfume I'd notice when she returned from an errand. The way she'd avoid eye contact during moments of vulnerability, as if afraid of what I might see. I became consumed by the need to know, to understand whether the woman I'd shared my life with was still the same person or if she'd become someone I no longer recognized. I began checking her phone when she wasn't looking, scrolling through messages and call logs, though she'd become adept at covering her tracks. I searched for signs in her social media activity, in the details of her daily routines, desperate for confirmation or, better yet, proof that my fears were unfounded. But the more I searched, the more convinced I became that something was wrong. The patterns were too consistent, the changes too deliberate to be explained away as coincidence. She was hiding something, of that I was certain. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to confront her. Not yet. I needed more. More proof, more understanding, more time to figure out what I would say and how I would say it. In the meantime, I played the role of the unsuspecting husband, outwardly unchanged while inwardly unraveling. I smiled when she smiled, kissed her goodnight, and held her in bed, even as my mind churned with questions I couldn't ask. Each day felt like a balancing act, a tightrope walk between the life we built and the truth I was beginning to uncover. It was a lonely place to be, trapped in the shadows of suspicion, unable to share my fears with anyone. I thought about speaking to a friend, seeking counsel or perspective, but the shame of even entertaining such doubts held me back. What kind of husband spies on his wife? What kind of man lets his imagination spiral out of control? Still, I couldn't stop. The need to know consumed me, driving me to lengths I never thought I'd go. I installed a tracking app on her phone under the guise of a family safety feature. I checked our shared accounts for unusual activity, scrutinizing credit card statements and phone bills for discrepancies. Every clue, no matter how small, became a piece of the puzzle I was desperate to solve. And yet, for all my efforts, the answers remained just out of reach. She was careful, more careful than I expected, and her secrecy only deepened my resolve. The woman I'd trusted implicitly had become an enigma, and I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The night I found out will forever be etched in my mind, not as a single moment of clarity but as a series of small, devastating revelations. It started with an innocuous decision to work late. She had mentioned it casually that morning, as if it were nothing, but the word sat with me all day. Something about her tone, the slight hesitation before she spoke, set me on edge. By the time the evening rolled around, I couldn't stop myself. I'd checked her location through the tracking app more times than I cared to admit, each glance at the map intensifying my anxiety. When her dot finally left the house and headed toward a part of town we had no business in, my heart sank. It wasn't the gym, nor the grocery store, nor anywhere else she might logically need to go. It was a hotel. I'd never been the impulsive type, but that night, reason took a back seat to instinct. I grabbed my coat, my keys, and drove there, each mile marked by the pounding of my heart against my ribs. The drive felt interminable, my mind racing through scenarios, each worse than the last. Yet, even as I pulled into the parking lot, a part of me still hoped I was wrong. That I'd find some innocent explanation for her presence there. The hotel was a modest one, the kind of place travelers stop at for a night and forget by morning. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, watching as the seconds ticked by. Her car was there, unmistakably hers, parked near the entrance. My chest tightened as I tried to summon the courage to follow through. I didn't go inside immediately. Instead, I watched, a mix of fear and anger paralyzing me. Minutes turned into an hour, and then I saw her. She stepped out, laughing softly, her head tilted toward a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, well-dressed, with a confident ease that made my stomach churn. They stood close, closer than strangers or acquaintances ever should. She touched his arm lightly, a gesture so small yet so intimate it felt like a punch to the gut. I couldn't look away. They lingered in the parking lot, exchanging words I couldn't hear but didn't need to. Their body language said it all. When he leaned in to kiss her, I thought I might shatter. The kiss wasn't hurried or stolen, it was deliberate, practiced, like something they'd done before. My mind struggled to process what my eyes were witnessing. I stayed in the car until they parted, each heading to their respective vehicles. She drove off first, and I followed at a distance, careful to keep her unaware of my presence. By the time she arrived home, I was seething with a fury I'd never known. She entered the house as if nothing had happened, her movements calm and practiced. I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity, wrestling with the urge to confront her right then and there. When I finally stepped inside, she greeted me with the same smile she'd always worn, a mask I now realized hid so much. I couldn't bring myself to return it. Instead, I muttered an excuse about being tired and went to bed, though sleep was impossible. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, reliving the scene in the parking lot over and over. Every detail, her laughter, his touch, their kiss, played on a loop, each repetition driving the knife deeper. In the days that followed, I became a ghost in my own home. I couldn't look at her without seeing the betrayal, couldn't hear her voice without imagining the lies woven into her words. She noticed, of course, asked if something was wrong, but I deflected. I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. I needed to understand the full scope of her deceit before I could face her. I began piecing together the fragments of her betrayal, poring over every clue I'd collected in the weeks leading up to that night. The messages, the late-night outings, the unexplained expenses, they all painted a picture I couldn't deny. I even returned to the hotel, hoping to find something tangible, some proof I could hold in my hands. What I found instead was a searing clarity: she had chosen to betray me, to betray our family, for reasons I couldn't yet fathom. The weight of her infidelity crushed me. I'd built my life around her, around us, and now that foundation had been ripped away, leaving me adrift. Anger simmered beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a deep, unrelenting pain. I wanted to confront her, to scream, to demand answers, but I also feared what those answers might be. Instead, I retreated inward, retreating from her, from the life we'd shared, as I tried to make sense of the chaos. The man I'd seen her with haunted me, his face a constant reminder of what I'd lost. I wanted to know who he was, how long this had been going on, and why she'd done it. But more than anything, I wanted to know what came next. How do you move forward when the person you trusted most has shattered everything you believed in? I didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was certain: our lives would never be the same. The betrayal had marked a turning point, one from which there was no return. Whatever happened next, it would be shaped by this moment, by the choice she had made and the choice I now faced. Revenge is not an impulse, it is a process. The night I discovered the truth, a seed was planted in my mind, one that grew quietly in the shadows of my thoughts. I didn't act immediately. The anger burned hot, yes, but I understood that hasty decisions would only rob me of the control I now craved. I needed to reclaim the power that her betrayal had stolen from me, and I would do so on my terms. The first step was observation. I became hyper-aware of her routines, her patterns, the lies she so seamlessly wove into her daily life. Her phone became my primary focus, though I was careful not to tip her off. I studied her movements through the tracking app, noting every deviation from the ordinary. The information I gathered wasn't just about her infidelity, it was ammunition for what was to come. I didn't stop there. The man she'd kissed in the hotel parking lot became an obsession. Through fragments of evidence, I pieced together his identity, a colleague from her past, someone she'd reconnected with under the guise of friendship. Social media provided the final confirmation, a gallery of subtle interactions that, in hindsight, seemed painfully obvious. I scrolled through their posts late at night, studying his face, his life, imagining the audacity it took for him to step into mine. Every revelation fueled my resolve. This wasn't just about her betrayal anymore, it was about dismantling the facade she'd so carefully constructed. But I knew I couldn't confront her yet. She needed to believe that her secret was safe, that I remained oblivious to the cracks in our marriage. Only then could I execute my plan. The first act of revenge was financial. Our accounts were shared, a symbol of trust that now felt laughable. I began siphoning money into a private account, small amounts at first, then larger sums as my confidence grew. It wasn't theft, it was insurance. She'd chosen to jeopardize our family's stability, and I wasn't about to let her walk away with more than she deserved. Next, I gathered evidence. Screenshots of messages, photos of her car outside the hotel, even a copy of the tracking history. I wanted a dossier so damning that she couldn't deny the truth when the time came. It was painstaking work, but each piece of proof felt like a small victory, a step closer to reclaiming what she'd taken from me. The most challenging part was maintaining the charade. Each morning, I greeted her with a smile, played the role of the loving husband she still believed me to be. We laughed over breakfast, exchanged pleasantries, even shared moments of intimacy that now felt like a performance. It was exhausting, but necessary. The facade had to hold until I was ready to bring it crashing down. As the days turned into weeks, I began setting the stage for her downfall. I reached out to a lawyer, someone discreet and experienced in cases like mine. Together, we devised a strategy that would ensure the divorce proceedings worked in my favor. Custody of the children, control of the assets, even the house, I wanted it all, and I wouldn't settle for less. I also made arrangements with friends and family, planting seeds of doubt about her behavior without revealing too much. Subtle comments about her increased absences, her distracted demeanor. It was a delicate balance, enough to make them question her, but not enough to arouse her suspicions. By the time the truth came to light, I wanted them firmly on my side. The final step was confronting him. I chose a neutral location, a coffee shop far from home, and waited until I knew he'd be alone. He didn't recognize me at first, his face a mask of polite indifference. But when I mentioned her name, the color drained from his cheeks. I didn't raise my voice or make a scene, I didn't need to. The weight of my words, calm, measured, laced with an undercurrent of menace, was enough to unnerve him. I left him with a warning, one he'd be foolish to ignore. Whatever fantasy they'd constructed together was over. If I saw him near her again, near my children, there would be consequences. He nodded mutely, his bravado stripped away, and I walked out, leaving him to stew in his fear. By the time I returned home that evening, everything was in place. The groundwork had been laid, the pieces arranged for the final act. She had no idea what was coming, no inkling of the storm I was about to unleash. For now, I let her exist in her illusion, blissfully unaware that her betrayal had set the stage for her own undoing. Revenge is not an impulse, it is a process. And mine was just beginning. Revenge, once set into motion, becomes an unrelenting force. It demands precision, patience, and the will to see it through to the end. By the time I initiated the next phase, I had prepared myself for every possible outcome. The plan wasn't just about retribution, it was about dismantling her life as methodically as she had dismantled mine. It began with a revelation. The evidence I had collected, the messages, the hotel visits, the undeniable proof of her infidelity, was shared strategically. I chose a family dinner as the stage, inviting her parents and siblings under the pretense of a celebration. The evening started uneventfully, filled with laughter and the warmth of familial connection. She was radiant, basking in the glow of a lie she believed she still controlled. When the moment felt right, I stood, raising my glass as if to make a toast. Instead, I calmly placed a folder on the table, its contents meticulously organized. I didn't need to say much, the photographs and text exchanges spoke for themselves. The room fell silent, the air thick with shock and disbelief. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth, her father's face darkened with anger, and she sat frozen, her complexion pale, her breath shallow. I left them to grapple with the truth. I didn't stay for the fallout, didn't linger to hear her feeble attempts at explanation. My goal was to expose her, to strip away the illusion she'd crafted, and I'd done so decisively. Let her face their judgment, their disappointment. I had other matters to attend to. The next target was her professional life. Through careful investigation, I'd uncovered a breach of her company's code of conduct, a small infraction tied to her affair but enough to raise questions about her integrity. Anonymously, I sent the evidence to her superiors. I knew the corporate world well enough to predict the outcome: suspicion would breed scrutiny, and scrutiny would uncover flaws she tried to hide. Within a week, she was placed on administrative leave, her career teetering on the edge. As she struggled to contain the damage, I turned my attention to the man she'd betrayed me with. His world, too, was vulnerable. He had a wife, children, a reputation built on the facade of respectability. I ensured she received copies of the same evidence I'd shared with our family. Her reaction was swift and decisive. Within days, his life unraveled in tandem with hers. They had chosen to conspire against me, and now they shared the consequences of that choice. But the most personal blow was yet to come. I filed for divorce, armed with every piece of leverage I'd painstakingly accumulated. My lawyer, prepared and ruthless, presented a case that left no room for negotiation. Custody of our children was granted to me. The court saw her actions as evidence of instability. Financially, I emerged unscathed, while she was left to navigate a mountain of debt and diminished assets. Throughout it all, I maintained a calm exterior. To her, it must have seemed as if I had become a stranger, a man she no longer recognized. And perhaps that was true. Betrayal changes you, reshapes the contours of your identity until you're no longer the person you once were. I had loved her, trusted her, built a life with her, and she had destroyed it. This was simply the consequence of her actions. The final act was closure, not for her, but for me. I wrote her a letter, not out of sentimentality but as a means to articulate the journey I'd endured. I recounted the love we'd shared, the family we'd built, and the pain she'd caused. I wanted her to understand the depth of my sorrow, not as a plea for reconciliation but as a declaration of my strength. I ended the letter with a single sentence: "You will not break me." When I delivered it, she didn't say a word. She read it in silence, her eyes betraying a mixture of regret and anger. But her emotions no longer held power over me. I walked away without looking back, the weight of her betrayal finally lifting from my shoulders. Revenge had demanded everything of me: time, energy, and a willingness to confront the darkest parts of myself. But it had also given me clarity. In dismantling the life she'd tainted, I had rebuilt my own. Stronger, wiser, and unyielding. Whatever lay ahead, I knew I was ready to face it, unburdened by the lies that once defined us. The final act of any story is resolution, a closing of chapters, and a reckoning with what remains. My journey through betrayal, discovery, and retribution had left me profoundly altered, and now, in the quiet aftermath, I found myself reflecting on what I had become. Life after her was not easy. The silence in the house was deafening at first, the absence of her presence a constant reminder of the family we'd once been. The children, resilient as they were, struggled to adapt to the new normal. I devoted myself to them, to being a stable and loving parent, to ensuring that they felt secure in a world that had been upended. Their laughter, their small victories in navigating this new chapter, became my anchor. But there was a darkness that lingered, a shadow cast by the choices I'd made in the name of revenge. I had achieved what I set out to do, I had exposed her betrayal, dismantled her life, and reclaimed my own. Yet, in doing so, I had also uncovered parts of myself that I struggled to reconcile. The man who had once been defined by love and trust was now a stranger to those ideals. I had become calculating, cold, a strategist in the theater of pain. The world around me, however, didn't see the turmoil within. To my friends and family, I was the man who had survived the unimaginable, who had emerged stronger from the ashes of a broken marriage. They admired my resilience, praised my dedication to my children, and marveled at my ability to rebuild. But their admiration felt hollow, a reflection of a facade I no longer cared to maintain. As the months turned to years, the wounds began to heal. Time, as they say, dulls all pain, and mine was no exception. The anger that had once driven me subsided, replaced by a weary acceptance of what had been. I began to find joy in the simple things again, the warmth of the sun on my face, the sound of my children's laughter, the quiet solace of a book on a rainy evening. Life moved forward, as it always does. One day, as I stood at the edge of a playground watching my children chase each other through the grass, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. They were happy, unburdened by the past, and their joy was a reminder of what truly mattered. The scars of betrayal would always remain, faint lines etched into the fabric of my being, but they no longer defined me. I began to forgive, not her, for that was a bridge I could never cross, but myself. I forgave the man I had been, the one who had loved so deeply that he was blind to deception. I forgave the man who had sought revenge with such fervor that he had lost sight of his own humanity. And in that forgiveness, I found a path forward. The house, once filled with memories of her, became a sanctuary for my children and me. I redecorated, reshaping the space to reflect the life we were building together. Walls were painted, furniture replaced, and the echoes of the past gradually faded. It was our home now, a place where love and trust could grow anew. As for her, I let her go. The bitterness I had clung to for so long dissolved into indifference. She became a figure in the periphery of my life, someone whose choices no longer had the power to affect me. I wished her no harm, but I wished her no happiness either. She was simply gone. In the end, my journey was not about revenge or justice, but about rediscovery. Betrayal had shattered me, but it had also forced me to confront the truths I'd long ignored, about her, about myself, about the fragility of love. And in that confrontation, I found a strength I never knew I possessed. Life is not a story with a tidy ending. It is a series of moments, of choices, of opportunities to grow or falter. I chose to grow. To become a man my children could look up to build a life that honored the lessons I'd learned. And though the scars remained, they became a testament to my resilience, a reminder that even in the face of betrayal, we can find our way back to ourselves.